Hey, welcome to the Pleasure Points Podcast. I am your host, James Rohr. I am so excited that you're here. We're going to be talking about all sorts of things related to a pleasurable life. Sometimes that's going to mean healing from chronic illness. Sometimes that's going to mean having great sex. Sometimes that's going to mean just not being so fucking awful to yourself or to the people around you. So in this episode, it starts off with a crazy story. Because in addition to my acupuncture practice, being a dating and relationship coach as well, sometimes I have experiences where it's like I'm a part-time intuitive. So I want to kick this episode off with one of those stories and lead it into a conversation about chi, about energy, about life force, and to remind you that the backbone of a phenomenal life is one where the energy is allowed to move freely. So if you've been suffering or if you've been living a pretty good life and you want to have even more pleasure, stay tuned to this episode and future episodes to come. Got a lot of great information for you, a lot of great stories, a lot of great guests. So without further ado, let's go ahead and cue the funky music and welcome to the show. So I want to start this podcast by telling you a little story. So a few years ago, this is back when I was still living in Miami. I had this experience where I was getting ready to go to work. And so I hopped in the shower, and in the shower, I noticed that there was a new bar of soap. So I was still married at the time. And so, I just assumed that she had put, some new soap in the shower. She was wont to do sometimes. So everything's going fine. It's like, whatever, I'm doing the shower stuff. And I grab this bar of soap, and as soon as I pick up the bar of soap, I swear to God, it was like all of a sudden there were a bunch of nuns in the shower with me, 3 of them in particular, and it was crazy. It was like far, far from sexual nuns, whatever that would be. In fact, they were saying things to me like, "We've got to scrub the sin off of you, and we've got to get you clean." And it felt like the soap, I mean, it was just a normal bar of soap, but it felt like it was like a Brillo pad or something. And as the shower continued, I had a moment where I felt like I was like almost transported, where I was like in a lineup, like at some like Catholic boarding school or something, and being like hosed down with a fire hose. And it was super intense. And at one point I even like looked at the bar of soap and I was like, what in the fuck are you? And it was like they kept saying, got to scrub the sin off of you. And it was such a bizarre thing, because I can't even remember the last time I thought about the world in terms of like good or bad, or like sin and righteous. And I was raised Catholic, so it would make sense to me that nuns and this kind of like energy was something that I might be able to kind of pick up on, or that would show up. But I didn't like go to Catholic school as a kid. It wasn't like that big of a deal in my family, but it was definitely something that I had like a kind of a connection to. So I'm like trying to keep going with the shower, and eventually I finish up, and as soon as I put the bar of soap down, like that whole energy from the nuns just went away. But I was a bit shook, I was a little like, kind of like in an altered state or something. It was just, the whole thing just felt so like fucking surreal. I wasn't high. I wasn't doing any drugs or anything. I was going to my job at Canyon Ranch, where I was working in Miami, getting ready to go there. And it was just so bizarre. So I get out of the shower, and in the living room was Alex, the woman I was married to, and her sister and her mom. And I step out and I was like, yo, I just had the strangest experience in the shower. And as I'm telling them the story of what's going on, I notice that they're like exchanging these furtive glances back and forth. And then they start laughing. And when I finish the story, the sister says to Alex, she says, Natalie says to Alex, she goes, hey, did you tell him about that bar of soap? And Alex is cracking up at this point, and she's like, no, I didn't say anything to him. Now, I'm like still in this kind of altered state, feeling like sort of violated in the shower, like just really bizarre. So I was getting kind of annoyed, and I was just like, tell me what? Like, what was so funny? And that's when their mom chimed in, and she said, well, we were at a farmer's market yesterday, and that's a very special bar of soap. That soap was handmade by a bunch of nuns in a convent. And I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? That's crazy. As I think about it, as I thought about it then, as I've like in that story, I think about a bunch in the years since, it makes me wonder like about the energy in things, right? So like somehow I was able to pick up on that, right? I don't know how. I wasn't focusing on it. I wasn't like in a particularly meditative state. It was just something that just happened. But how does that happen? You know, like, first of all, like, what the fuck is that? Like, I don't know. I don't know anything. I'm just telling you the story as it happened to me. But I think that there's something about the energy and intention, and that somehow that came through with this bar of soap. And it just so happened that I was able to feel it. And so when we dive into this a little bit, like, I think that when in Chinese medicine, when we talk about qi and we talk about energy, that explains some of what I was able to pick up that particular day in that bar of soap. But I think it also gets at, why do we like handmade items? What is the appeal of handmade goods? There's just something about, you know, craftsmanship, attention to detail. But there might also be this kind of invisible energy that is somehow imparted into things that are curated with intention, with focus, with dedication. And I wonder if that's, you know, part of what I was maybe able to pick up that day in the shower with that particular bar of soap, and why, you know, when you put on like a t-shirt from a sweatshop or something, that you may not be, you know, filled with images of that sweatshop, because, you know, maybe it's a factory, it's not being touched by a lot of hands. The injection of energy into that may be more kind of manufactured, and maybe there's something about being human and these human qualities of consciousness and intention, and possibly even, you know, the energy that comes out of our hands. I mean, I don't fucking know. What kind of ideas do you guys have? I'd love to hear about it. Maybe you've ever had an experience like this, where you pick something up and you felt it so strongly. Same thing like with used things, right? At thrift stores, or like used good places, or even like estate sales and stuff like that, you know, where you can pick up on stuff. Maybe this is also the phenomenon that happens like with a house, right? Haunted houses and that sort of thing. Is there somehow like a memory that is stored in things and objects? And is it this kind of explosion of energy, this explosion of the kind of the energy that's related to traumatic events, or things that are very sort of like punctuated, that somehow what might seem to be inanimate objects might be able to absorb that? And is there like this kind of qi of energy? And so I thought I wanted to build on this story and talk a little bit more about what the Chinese medicine concept of qi, give you guys a little bit deeper dive into that, see if I could get some explanations as to like what the fuck happened with me in that bar of soap, but also to help understand, when you understand the framework of qi and of energy, it's really the backbone of a lot of the things that I talk about, and in the sense of breaking from stagnation, breaking old patterns, tapping into this idea of possibilities. So if you've been dealing with stuff in your life that's been difficult, that's been persistent, that hasn't gone away, that's been really frustrating, if you are stuck in a loop where you're repeating it over and over and over again, especially if it's an unhealthy cycle, pay attention to some of these definitions in this conversation of qi and of energy, because inherent in any conversation about energy is that it can change. There's a dynamic quality to it that I certainly know from when I was really sick, that it was really critical to be open to that possibility, that even though I had a diagnosis of a chronic condition, even though I was, you know, persistently sick day after day after day after day after day after day for 8, 9, 10 years, that this idea of qi gave hope. And this is one of the places where I think acupuncture in particular fills such a vital gap or deficiency in our modern healthcare system, where Western medicine seems to do a pretty good job of eradicating hope with a lot of conditions that might actually go away, but instead they get labeled chronic. So there's this quote that I thought of after the thing happened with the soap that I picked up when I was in acupuncture school, which is, When the intent arrives, the chi arrives. You may have heard of something kind of similar to that, where it's like, where your thoughts go, the energy goes, right? But this is an old saying where they say, where the intent arrives, the chi arrives. And that was the first thing that I thought of after the bar of soap thing, as I was meditating on it and thinking about it. And it just kind of occurs to me that, the women making that soap probably did it with so much intention, that they had so much chi and energy that was able to go into that soap that I was able to feel it. But let me back up now and explain a little bit more about like what chi is and where does it come from and why you should give a shit. Well, if you shop at thrift stores or if you eat food that somebody else makes, and if you've ever felt like you catch feelings from other people easier than you can catch a cold, then pay attention, because this idea of chi might be fascinating for you. So let's get some clarity on what the chi says. So let's take a look at some of the books. So here's the thing, is that chi is like, the reason that we still call it chi and it hasn't been translated into an English term is because its definition is very hard to pin down. So I'm going to take a look at a couple of quotes to give it some context, especially stuff that can be applicable to your daily life. So the simplest definition of chi is that it's indispensable to all of life. We feel it, we see it. We see by what it makes move, by what it gives animation to. Sometimes we can sense it, and we know when it's gone, it's gone. You see something that's lifeless, like, the chi left, Now, there's this great quote from Ted Kapchuk. I think it's from Ted Kapchuk, a Harvard professor, and he says, chi is the thread connecting all being. Chi is the common denominator of all things. Chi is the potential and the actualization of transformation. Chi is both the fundamental quality of being and becoming. Chi takes countless forms. Chi allows things to become other things. Chi is the ceaseless throbbing, the substratum of the cosmos. That's a lot of things. That's pretty broad, right? That covers a lot of area. So let's back it up to the beginning. So let's take a look at the Tao Te Ching and see what they have to say about the formation of the universe and how that relates to chi, and ultimately how this comes back to your health, your relationships, and that bar of soap. So there's this, in the Tao Te Ching, they talk about the history of the universe, and they say the Tao gives birth to one. One gives birth to two. Two gives birth to three, and three gives birth to 10,000 things. So what the fuck are they talking about, right? Well, the one is going to be the original void. It's the emptiness. And from that big bang or whatever it is, came the two, which is the yin and the yang. So the yin is going to be dark, solid, flat, feminine, grounding, stillness, tranquil. The character means literally the shady side of the hill. And the yang is the opposite of that. It's the masculine, it's the sun, it's the light, it's the expansion, it's the extroversion, it's the stimulation, the arousal, the animated, the excitable. The character means the sunny side of the hill. And we see that the yin and the yang are in that the Tai Chi symbol, where you've got, the curved line in the middle, and you see some black, a little bit of white, and then you've got the white with a little bit of black. This is going to be the pictograph, if you will, of this yin and yang. And it really explains so much of the cosmos, of the fundamental nature and the things that we value in Chinese medicine, especially as it relates to qi. So now what we've got here is the two gives birth to three. So the three is going to be the qi. Right? So the chi is going to be that next component where there's like four main characteristics of yin and yang. But the one that I want to focus on here is how yin can transform into yang and yang can transform into yin. And this is really, I think, the best way of thinking about where chi comes from, both from the beginning of the universe, but also on a daily basis, where you've got that curved line in the middle, right? So that's meant to capture that sense of movement. So You can have the yang transforming into yin. The yin is going to change its state back into yang. There's going to be this constant like ebb and flow that's going to happen. And as one transforms into the other and back and forth as it goes, the byproduct of that transformation is qi. So just like when you think about rubbing your hands together, the byproduct of that friction is heat. You can think about the byproduct of this movement from one state to the other, from yin into yang, is qi. It's this energy, this life force, this vitality. And then as the Tao Te Ching says, the three, this qi, the yin and yang with the qi, gives birth to 10,000 things. So when you've got yin and yang, and then they're able to transform into each other to create the qi, from the qi you have unlimited possibilities. You know, here they say they create the 10,000 things. And so you get the sense that qi, that energy, this life force, it stems from movement. So it needs movement to activate it, to induce a change. So we need to create and start thinking about the environment with which we find ourselves, the environment that we're surrounded by, that can induce this change or this activation of qi. And what's amazing is that one of the characters, the Chinese characters for qi, has a really interesting kind of shape to it. So what it says is that there's an upper radical for it stands for rising vapor, and the lower radical is grain. So you can think about it, the grain of being like a rice grain, right? So there's the heat that's going to cook that grain that helps distill out the essence, right? That most sort of exquisite, energetic part of the grain. And it's the combination of this distillation and the act of that movement, that rising that happens with that vapor, that transformation from substance into vapor, that symbol attempts to capture this philosophical understanding of qi. So in that character, it has that sense of movement built into it. Same thing with the curved line in that yin-yang symbol. So you get the sense when you start meditating on qi and of energy and of life force that movement is critical, that there's something that is tangible, right? The rice grain has this seed of qi that is kind of dormant in it, and it needs to be in the right environment for it to be activated. Just like the qi in your food, right? If you have malabsorption issues, if you've got leaky gut or your gut biome is all fucked up, right? It can be hard for you to actually extract the nutrients or the vitamins from that food. So the food has that potential qi in it, but your stomach, your body may not be able to extract it. So in the process of healing and in the process of thinking about this qi, you want to start thinking about a couple of things. One is, what's the environment that you can put yourself in that's going to help you to change state effortlessly, or mostly effortlessly, from one into the other? So how do you go from awake to sleeping, or from sleeping to awake? Do you create an environment that's conducive to that kind of transition? Or do you expect yourself to be able to go from staring at your phone, watching TV with all the lights on, to shutting everything off and being asleep within 5 minutes? Right? That's a kind of unrealistic expectation. That's not creating an environment that allows for this easy flowing of state change. Part of the reason why I love the essential oils so much is that not only are they actually like little bottles that are full of this distilled essence, right? The actual qi of the plant, but they help us to change state. So you can go from being, sad to energized, from tired to awake, all of these different oils, depending on what they do, they can help us to induce the state change. And that movement is really critical because the qi wants to move. So qi that is going to be giving animation wants to move. And that's where we say that people that feel really good, they have a bunch of qi and the qi flows freely. But people that are in dis-ease or in discomfort, if you have pain, the qi that you might have is stuck. And when the qi gets stuck, you can have, relative imbalances where on the one hand, on the other side of the stuck, there's empty because nothing's been allowed to flow. And then behind the stuckness, there's all that stagnation, this buildup of energy that wants to move. That's why, when you think about needing to transform, one of the best things I think that can happen is movement. So physically, if you're in pain, a lot of times the solution is going to be to move. That actually resting for too long isn't necessarily the best idea. It depends on the injury, of course, but encouraging movement is something that I do all the time. The oils help to move. The acupuncture can help to move. Herbs help to move, but also your thoughts. Your thoughts are going to be fed by the chi, and then the chi is going to feed the thoughts. So we're all stuck in this loop here, back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately, what's going to happen is where with chi, you're going to want to pay attention to your environment and take a look at what it is that you're eating, that you're drinking, that you're thinking about, the people you're surrounding yourself by, and really dial in. Is this an environment that is allowing me to access this chi, that is allowing me to access this dormant potential that's inside of me? So just like when they looked at nature to observe what was going on and they apply those principles internally, you can take this yin yang identity. And the beauty of the yin yang symbol is that you've got, a little bit of one in the other. And so what's cool about this Tai Chi symbol, this yin yang symbol, is that you've got a little bit of white in the black and a little bit of black within the white. And so what it's saying there is that you've got the yin and the yang, but they are only known by their opposite. So it's a relative thing. So hot because cold, right? Activity because rest. And so we can't really define one without the other. But that inherent in one is the other. So the yin can turn into yang and the yang can turn back into yin. And that's just so fucking cool. And so what that means, if you've been really sick, is that even though you don't feel well, you have within you the opposite. You have within you wellness. Your wellness may be dormant, or it may be dormant in certain areas, but it's still there. So inside of all of you, of all of us that are living, is the potential for the other. Paying attention to the environment that's around you is absolutely critical. So this is a lot of the stuff that I do with my clients, which is, there's chi like all around us. There's this life force, right? And we are this life force. And if you think about our seeds of potential, the seed of wellness, the seed of happiness, the seed of joy that is dormant inside of you, well, just like a plant, it needs an environment around it that's going to nurture its growth. So if you're really frustrated, if things are not going well for you, one step can be to take a look at your environment. What are you consuming? What are you ingesting? What are you watching on TV? What are you eating? What are you listening to people talk about? Are you listening to the news all the time? All of that stuff is creating your environment that is nurturing or encouraging the expression of certain types of chi in the body through certain pathways, through certain meridians. Right? Or it's causing things to be obstructed. If you eat a greasy piece of pizza, right, that can obstruct the flow of chi. If you smoke too much weed, that might expand the chi, disperse the chi so much you can't even move. But if you're looking to transform, paying attention to your environment is a great place to start. What's the artwork on your walls? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Who's around you? What's your soundscape like? All of that stuff. Because if you're really looking to transform, you've got to create an environment that is nurturing of that transformation. And for some of you, it's going to be easier than others. Some of you, you might be living with roommates, or you're still living at home with your parents, and, that environment can pose its own challenges. But just because there's a challenge doesn't mean that the expression of the chi that you want, the expression of those qualities that are already dormant inside of you, just because it's difficult doesn't mean they can't be expressed. But you might have to give it a little more care and attention, as if you were, trying to keep a flame on a candle going in a windy environment. It's possible, but you got to pay attention. And so the payoff here is that when that chi is allowed to express itself, when your energy starts flowing again, everything just starts feeling better. So as the yin turns into yang and the yang turns into yin, that's going to create some chi, right? That's going to create this kind of explosion of energy. And once the chi is in the body, the Chinese medicine, they talk about these different types of energy. The one that I want to touch on here is this idea of ancestral chi. And this is going to be chi that is in the body that's really the foundation of vitality and stamina. And this is what is said to be imbued to you during conception and then as you're a fetus developing. And I'll talk more about this in the Sex and the Taoist Sexual Practices podcast. But for right now, just know that this ancestral chi is a very, very valuable. So it guides our aging. It guides the development of wisdom. It's like really plays a big part in like the immune system and just overall vitality. So people that are born, like kids that are born with congenital deficiencies or who are always sick as a kids, those kind of sickly and weak kids, we say that those kids were born with a deficiency of ancestral chi. And if people are careless in their sexual practices, they say that that can also deplete the amount of ancestral chi that you have in the body. So that's a really fun podcast to keep your eyes out for. Now, what do you do with this? Well, this cultivation of chi, of energy, of life force is really like the foundation of existence. So you want to make sure that the chi that you have, this ancestral chi, the chi that you're born with, the chi that you can get from your food and from your environment, that it's supportive, that it's nurturing to you. So everybody has different frequencies. We all like to, everyone's got their little nuances. So understanding yourself, understanding, what it is that you eat or that you watch or that people you hang out with, where it is that you thrive. This is like, we see a lot of the personality profiles, and we'll talk about if someone's anxious, or in the Enneagram, the type 3 and the disc profiles and like all this shit, right? All this stuff to kind of know and get a handle on some of your constitution types. Well, in Chinese medicine, it's really just, how does your chi like to express itself? And what are you doing to put yourself in a good mood? What are you doing to create an environment where your chi is flowing and where when it comes time for you to impart your energy field on those closest to you or into the craft that you're making or to the food that you're preparing, are you ready to put a good mood into that? Are you ready to express the free flow of chi so that everything around you can be abundant? I believe that when there is such focused intention, the chi arrives. The chi shows up. All of that changing of state, all that transformation that you've been doing, all of that nurturing of your environment, all of that contributes to these moments where you can impart such a powerful sense of chi. In this case, maybe that's what they did to that bar of soap. And in other times, maybe it's the impact that you have when you hug your child, or when your child hugs you, or when you're with a partner, or maybe when you're eating some delicious food that had been carefully and meticulously curated. When the intent arrives, the chi arrives. And if your intention is to listen, if your intention is to be awake, you have chi that will support you with that. If you have an intention to be angry, to be frustrated, to be sick, to be annoyed, your chi can be used for that as well. So I encourage you to think about where your intention is and to know that chi will go there. Check yourself. Am I creating an environment that is allowing for my dormant potential to transform? If you're sick, know that within that illness is the seed of health. If you're frustrated with somebody, know that within your frustration is peace. The question is, what is your intention? What chi are you allowing to arrive or to manifest? What's that potential that you're allowing for? And the next time you're going through your stuff, right, there's that woman who does the KonMari method, you go through and ask yourself, does this bring me joy, right? What is your interaction? What is your relationship with those things? If you're going to buy something, see if you can still yourself for a moment and maybe get a sense of what is the energy that might be in here. Was this made with intention, or was there chi that was somehow imparted into this thing? I don't know what the old masters and mystics would say about this conversation, but I haven't heard anything from Western medicine that gets anywhere close to it. But this idea of chi and intention and transformation and this sort of the ceasing and the pulsing and the throbbing in the universe with this ebbing and flowing of chi and of energy and of life force just somehow seems to make more sense to me. And then when I have experiences like that with the soap, it's like, well, maybe it was just made with intention. And somehow the chemical bonds or the molecules in this soap somehow absorbed it. And I was able to pick it up. I don't know. What do you think? Hit me up. Let me know what your ideas are. So I'm super stoked that you're here. Stay tuned. We got lots more good stuff to come. I've got good interviews, all sorts of other, interesting things that we'll be talking about. I'm so stoked to be on this journey with you. Welcome to the podcast. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will catch you next time.